The morning fog hung thick over London as Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell received the call that would change everything. Her phone buzzed at 5:47 a.m., cutting through the silence of her small flat in South London. The voice on the other end belonged to Chief Superintendent Williams, and his tone carried an urgency she had rarely heard in her 15 years with the Metropolitan Police. "Sarah, I need you at Clarence House immediately. This is classified at the highest level. Tell no one where you're going." Within 30 minutes, Sarah found herself passing through multiple security checkpoints, her credentials scrutinized by officers whose faces she didn't recognize. The atmosphere was tense, electric with the kind of nervous energy that only comes when something truly serious threatens the very foundations of British society. Inside the elegant corridors of Clarence House, Sarah was led to a secure briefing room where several officials waited. Among them sat a woman she immediately recognized as Dame Victoria Hartwell, the Queen's private secretary, whose usually composed demeanor showed cracks of genuine concern. "Detective Inspector Mitchell," Dame Victoria began, her voice steady but strained, "what I'm about to tell you cannot leave this room. We have received credible intelligence about a plot against the royal family, specifically targeting Tom Parker Bowles." Sarah's breath caught. Tom Parker Bowles, Queen Camilla's son from her first marriage, had always maintained a relatively low profile compared to other members of the royal family. A food critic and author, he seemed an unlikely target for the kind of threats that usually concerned royal protection. "The threat isn't coming from international terrorists or foreign agents," Dame Victoria continued, sliding a thick file across the mahogany table. "It's domestic. And it's personal." As Sarah opened the file, photographs spilled out. Images of Tom at various London restaurants, leaving his publisher's office, walking through Borough Market. Someone had been watching him, documenting his movements with the precision of a professional surveillance operation. But these weren't the blurry long-distance shots typical of paparazzi. These were close, clear, taken with expensive equipment by someone with extensive training. "The individual behind this surveillance calls himself the Patriot," explained Commander James Ashford, the head of Royal Protection. "We believe he's a former military officer, possibly special forces, who has become radicalized by his own interpretation of what the monarchy should represent." Sarah studied the photographs more carefully. In several images, red circles had been drawn around Tom's location, with handwritten notes in the margins. The handwriting was neat, methodical, suggesting someone with military discipline. One note particularly chilled her: "Target isolated at 14:30. Clear line of sight from adjacent building. Opportunity window, 90 seconds. When did you first become aware of this threat?" Sarah asked, her detective instincts taking over. Dame Victoria exchanged glances with Commander Ashford before answering. 3 weeks ago, we intercepted communications on a military forum. Someone using the codename The Patriot had been recruiting others who shared his belief that Queen Camilla's children from her first marriage represent a contamination of the royal bloodline. The words hung heavy in the air. Sarah had seen extremism in many forms during her career, but this felt different. This wasn't about politics or religion. This was about a twisted sense of duty, a perversion of loyalty that had transformed love of country into something dark and dangerous. His posts suggest he believes that by eliminating Tom Parker Bowles, he would be purifying the monarchy, Commander Ashford continued. He's convinced himself that he's acting in the best interests of Britain and the Crown, which makes him particularly dangerous. He genuinely believes he's a patriot performing a sacred duty. Sarah flipped through more pages in the file. Intelligence reports suggested the Patriot had been planning this operation for months, possibly longer. He had studied Tom's routines, identified his security vulnerabilities, and mapped out multiple scenarios for an attack. The level of preparation was professional, methodical, and deeply unsettling. Why hasn't royal protection simply increased security around Tom? Sarah asked. We have, discreetly, Dame Victoria replied. But Tom doesn't know the full extent of the threat. He knows his security has been enhanced for general precautionary reasons, but we've been careful not to alarm him unnecessarily. However, the Patriot seems to be adapting to our increased security measures. He's watching our watchers. The implications were staggering. If the Patriot was indeed former Special Forces, he would know how Royal Protection operated. He would understand their protocols, their weaknesses, their standard responses to threats. In many ways, he was the perfect adversary, someone trained by the same system now trying to stop him. Sarah's phone vibrated with a text message. As she glanced at it, her blood ran cold. The message was from an unknown number, D.I. Mitchell. "I know you're at Clarence's house. I know why you're there. Tell them it won't work. The crown must be purified. A true patriot." The room fell silent as Sarah showed the message to the others. Commander Ashford immediately began barking orders into his radio, initiating security protocols, while Dame Victoria's face went pale. How did he know? Sarah whispered, more to herself than to the others. "He's been watching us all," Commander Ashford replied grimly. "This isn't just about Tom anymore. He knows our entire operation." As if to confirm his words, another message arrived on Sarah's phone. "Queen Camilla's bastard son will pay for corrupting our sacred monarchy. His foreign blood pollutes the crown. Britain deserves better. The cleansing begins tonight." The raw hatred in the words was unmistakable, but so was the cold calculation behind them. This wasn't the ranting of a madman. This was the measured threat of someone who had the skills and determination to carry out his promises. Dame Victoria stood abruptly, her usual diplomatic composure cracking. "We need to contact the palace immediately. If he's planning something for tonight, where is Tom right now?" Sarah interrupted. Commander Ashford checked his tablet. "He's scheduled to attend a book launch at Daunt Books in Marylebone at 7 o'clock this evening. High-profile event, lots of media coverage, hundreds of attendees." "Perfect target," Sarah muttered. "Public event, predictable timing, multiple escape routes for the attacker, and maximum media impact if something goes wrong." The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Somewhere in London, a highly trained individual was preparing to commit an act of violence that would shock the nation and potentially destabilize the monarchy itself. And she was being tasked with stopping him. "What do we know about his identity?" Sarah asked, forcing herself to focus on the practical details of the investigation. "Very little," Commander Ashford admitted. "The Patriot covers his tracks well. His communications are encrypted, his surveillance is professional, and he's careful never to reveal personal details. Our cyber crimes unit has been trying to trace him for weeks without success. But someone with his training doesn't just appear out of nowhere," Sarah pointed out. "If he's former Special Forces, there will be records. Medical files, psychological evaluations, disciplinary actions. Something that might explain how he became radicalized." Dame Victoria nodded. "We've been working with the Ministry of Defense, but personnel records for Special Forces are heavily classified. It's taking time to get the necessary clearances." Time was exactly what they didn't have. If the Patriot was planning something for tonight, they had less than 12 hours to identify, locate, and neutralize the threat. And, with each passing moment, Tom Parker Bowles was moving closer to what might be a carefully orchestrated death trap. Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The Patriot's knowledge of their investigation suggested he either had inside information or was conducting sophisticated electronic surveillance. Either possibility was deeply troubling. If he had infiltrated their operation, then everything they planned could be compromised. If he was monitoring their communications, then he would know exactly how they intended to protect Tom. "We need to change the game," Sarah said suddenly. "He's been watching us, anticipating our moves. We need to do something he won't expect." "What do you suggest?" Dame Victoria asked. "We don't just protect Tom. We hunt the Patriot. Turn this from a defensive operation into an offensive one. Use Tom as bait, but, on our terms, in a location we can control." The suggestion caused immediate concern among the officials present. The idea of deliberately placing a member of the royal family in danger went against every protocol and instinct of royal protection. "Absolutely not," Commander Ashford said immediately. "We cannot and will not use Tom as bait. Our job is to protect him, not endanger him.
But, don't you see? Sarah pressed.
He's already in danger. The Patriot knows where he'll be tonight.
He's probably already positioned, already prepared.
If Tom goes to that book launch, he's walking into a trap we can't fully control. But, if we create our own scenario, we can dictate the terms. The room fell silent as the officials considered her words. The logic was sound, but the risks were enormous. If something went wrong, if the Patriots succeeded despite their preparations, the consequences would be catastrophic for everyone involved. Dame Victoria spoke carefully, weighing each word.
Even if we agreed to such a plan, how would we convince Tom to participate? He doesn't know the full extent of the threat.
We tell him the truth, Sarah replied.
All of it.
He's an adult, a British citizen who has the right to know when his life is in danger. And, from what I understand about him, he's not someone who would run from a fight, especially one that threatens his family and the institution his stepfather represents.
Another message arrived on Sarah's phone, this one containing a single photograph.
It showed Tom Parker Bowles leaving his London home that morning, completely unaware that he was being watched. But, what made the image truly chilling was the red crosshair symbol that had been digitally added to the center of his forehead. The message was clear: the Patriot had Tom in his sights, literally and figuratively. And, unlike the previous communications, this one felt immediate, urgent, final. It was no longer a matter of if the Patriot would act, but when and where.
He's escalating, Sarah observed, showing the image to the others. This feels like his final communication before he moves to action. Commander Ashford was already on his radio, updating Tom's security detail and implementing emergency protocols.
But Sarah could see the frustration in his eyes. They were playing defense against an opponent who knew all their moves, who had been planning this operation longer than they had been aware of the threat.
As the meeting continued, Sarah found herself thinking about the psychology of their adversary.
The Patriot genuinely believed he was serving Britain by planning to kill Tom Parker Bowles. In his twisted logic, he was a patriot defending the purity of the monarchy against foreign influence. This wasn't a man who could be reasoned with or deterred by normal means. He was motivated by what he saw as sacred duty, which made him both predictable and extremely dangerous.
The clock on the wall showed 11:30 a.m.
In 7.5 hours, Tom was scheduled to arrive at the book launch. In 7.5 hours, the Patriot would likely make his move. And, somewhere in London, a highly trained individual was making his final preparations for an act of violence that would shock the nation.
Sarah looked around the room at the assembled officials, each carrying the weight of an impossible responsibility.
They were tasked with protecting not just one man, but the stability and integrity of the British monarchy itself.
The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error couldn't be smaller.
We need to move quickly, she said, standing up from the table.
If we're going to change the game, we need to start now.
Every minute we spend in this room is a minute the Patriot has to prepare for tonight. As the officials began to disperse, implementing the first stages of their emergency response, Sarah remained behind for a moment, studying the photographs of Tom Parker Bowles that covered the table. In each image, he looked relaxed, unaware, going about his daily life with the confidence of someone who had never truly feared for his safety.
By tonight, that innocence would be gone forever.
Whether they succeeded or failed in stopping the Patriot, Tom's life would never be the same. The carefree existence of a royal family member living a relatively normal life was about to end, replaced by the constant awareness that there were people in the world who wanted him dead for no crime other than being born to the wrong mother. The responsibility felt overwhelming, but Sarah pushed the feeling aside. She had a job to do, a life to save, and less than 8 hours to do it.
Somewhere in London, the Patriot was counting down to what he believed would be his moment of patriotic glory.
She was determined to make sure that instead, it became the moment of his capture and the end of his twisted crusade against the royal family. The secure conference room at Scotland Yard buzzed with controlled chaos as Sarah coordinated the most sensitive operation of her career. Multiple screens displayed surveillance feeds, communication intercepts, and tactical diagrams while a team of Britain's finest investigators worked against the clock to unmask the Patriot before he could strike. Dr. Emma Thornfield, a forensic psychologist specializing in extremist behavior, had been called in to help build a psychological profile of their target. Her preliminary assessment painted a disturbing picture of a highly intelligent individual whose sense of patriotic duty had been twisted into something deadly. Based on his communications and surveillance methods, we're dealing with someone who sees himself as a guardian of British values, Dr. Thornfield explained to the assembled team. He's not motivated by personal gain or political ideology in the traditional sense. He genuinely believes he's protecting the monarchy from what he perceives as contamination. Sarah studied the behavioral analysis while coordinating with cybercrime specialist Detective Sergeant Mark Chan, who had been working around the clock to trace the Patriot's digital footprint. Despite his expertise, the Patriot's operational security remained frustratingly effective. He's using military-grade encryption and routing his communications through multiple proxy servers, Chen reported. But he's not perfect. We've identified 3 potential physical locations where he's accessed public Wi-Fi networks over the past month. The locations formed a triangle across central London, a coffee shop in Bloomsbury, an internet cafe in King's Cross, and a public library in Westminster. Each location offered strategic advantages for surveillance while providing easy escape routes through London's complex transport network. He's creating an operational base in the center of London, Sarah observed, studying the map. Close enough to monitor Tom's movements, far enough from any single location to avoid detection. Commander Ashford entered the room carrying updated intelligence from the Ministry of Defense. The search through military personnel records had finally yielded results, though the information was both helpful and deeply concerning. We've identified 3 possible candidates, he announced, placing photographs on the table. All former Special Forces operators who left the military under circumstances that raised questions about their psychological stability. The first photograph showed Captain Michael Harrison, 42, who had served with the SAS before being medically discharged following a mission in Afghanistan that resulted in civilian casualties. His psychological evaluation noted increasing paranoia and difficulty adjusting to civilian life. The second candidate was Staff Sergeant David Webb, 38, formerly of the Special Reconnaissance Regiment. He had been discharged after making inflammatory comments about immigration and the changing nature of British society. His file contained multiple reprimands for inappropriate behavior and extremist statements. The third photograph showed Major James Caldwell, 45, whose distinguished career with the SBS had ended abruptly following a breakdown during a classified operation. His medical records indicated severe PTSD combined with increasing obsession with what he called the purity of British institutions. Any of these men have the training and motivation to carry out this operation, Commander Ashford explained. But we're still working to determine which one is actually the Patriot. Dr. Thornfield studied the psychological profiles carefully. All 3 fit the general pattern, but Major Caldwell's obsession with institutional purity makes him the most likely candidate. His military record shows increasing preoccupation with protecting British values against what he saw as foreign influence. While the team worked to narrow down their suspect list, Sarah received an urgent call from Dame Victoria at Clarence House. Tom Parker Bowles had been informed about the threat against his life and was being transported to a secure location for his own protection. His reaction had been exactly what Sarah had predicted. He wants to help catch this person, Dame Victoria reported over the secure phone line. He's angry that someone would target him because of who his mother married, and he's determined not to let fear dictate his actions. What about the book launch tonight? Sarah asked. Officially cancelled due to a family emergency. But Tom has agreed to participate in a controlled operation if it will help apprehend the Patriot. This was the opening Sarah had hoped for. With Tom's cooperation, they could design a scenario that would draw the Patriot into a trap while maintaining maximum security for their protected person. But the operation would need to be carefully choreographed to avoid tipping off their target. We'll need to make it look authentic, Sarah explained to the team. The Patriot has been monitoring our communications and security arrangements. If we suddenly change Tom's schedule without a believable reason, he'll know it's a trap. Detective Sergeant Chen had an idea. What if we leak false information about a private dinner Tom is attending tonight? Something exclusive, high security, but with exploitable vulnerabilities that the Patriot might try to take advantage of.
The plan began to take shape.
They would create the appearance of a private dinner at the exclusive Gramercy Club in Mayfair, complete with realistic security arrangements that would appear professional but contain deliberate gaps that the Patriot might exploit. The location offered multiple advantages: limited access points, excellent sightlines for their own surveillance teams, and the ability to control the civilian population in the area. As the afternoon progressed, the operation became increasingly complex. Multiple departments coordinated their efforts while maintaining the appearance of normal police business. Surveillance teams were positioned around the Gramercy Club, cybercrime specialists monitored for any digital chatter about the supposed dinner, and specialist firearms officers prepared for the possibility of armed confrontation. Dr. Thornfield worked with Sarah to anticipate the Patriot's likely approach to the target. "He'll want maximum impact with minimum risk to himself," she predicted. Based on his military background, he'll probably try for a long-distance shot from an elevated position. He'll also have multiple escape routes planned. The buildings surrounding the Gramercy Club were systematically searched and secured, with particular attention paid to locations that offered clear sightlines to the club's entrance. The operation required careful coordination to avoid alerting the Patriot while ensuring no civilian areas remained vulnerable. At 4:30 p.m., they received the break they had been hoping for. Detective Sergeant Chen's monitoring of internet activity had detected someone accessing architectural plans for buildings near the Gramercy Club from a public computer terminal in Westminster. The timing and nature of the search strongly suggested the Patriot was conducting final reconnaissance for his planned attack. "He took the bait," Chen reported excitedly. "Someone downloaded building schematics, security camera locations, and even traffic patterns around the club.
They're definitely planning something for tonight." Sarah felt a mixture of relief and apprehension.
They had successfully manipulated the Patriot into revealing his presence, but now they had to execute the most dangerous part of their plan.
Tom Parker Bowles would need to appear vulnerable enough to encourage an attack while remaining safe enough to avoid actual harm.
The psychological pressure on Tom was enormous. He had spent the day learning that someone wanted to kill him because of his mother's marriage to the king, and now he was being asked to act as bait in a dangerous operation to catch his would-be assassin. To his credit, he remained calm and determined throughout the briefings, asking intelligent questions about the operation and expressing confidence in the team's abilities. "I understand the risks," Tom told Sarah during their final briefing at the secure location. "But I can't live the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if this person is still out there planning to hurt my family.
If there's a chance to end this tonight, I want to take it." As evening approached, the final preparations intensified.
Tom was fitted with body armor disguised beneath his dinner jacket, and a small tracking device was sewn into his clothing as an additional security measure. The route to the Gramercy Club was carefully planned to provide multiple opportunities for surveillance teams to confirm the Patriot's presence before Tom reached the potential danger zone. At 6:15 p.m., the operation officially began.
Tom's armored vehicle left the secure location with appropriate fanfare, followed by a visible security detail that appeared professional but not overwhelming. They needed to maintain the illusion that this was a standard protective operation, not a carefully orchestrated trap.
Sarah positioned herself in the command vehicle 3 blocks from the Gramercy Club, monitoring multiple communication channels and surveillance feeds. Every building within rifle range had been cleared and secured, but she knew that the Patriot's military training meant he could be anywhere, using methods they hadn't anticipated. Target vehicle approaching Checkpoint 1, came the radio communication from the advanced security team. No unusual activity observed. But even as the operation proceeded according to plan, Sarah felt a growing unease. The Patriot had proven himself to be highly intelligent and professionally trained.
Would he really fall for a trap this straightforward, or was he planning something they hadn't considered?
Her concerns proved justified when Detective Sergeant Chen's voice crackled through the radio with urgent news. "Command, we've detected unusual electronic activity in the area. Someone is attempting to access traffic control systems and security camera networks around the club."
The implications hit Sarah immediately. The Patriot wasn't just planning a simple sniper attack.
He was attempting to manipulate the urban infrastructure to create chaos and confusion that would aid his escape. Traffic lights could be altered to create gridlock, security cameras could be disabled to eliminate evidence, and emergency communication systems could be disrupted to delay police response. He's turning the entire area into his weapon, Sarah realized, speaking quickly into her radio. All units, we need to assume he has access to electronic systems in the area. Be prepared for traffic disruption, communication interference, and compromised surveillance equipment. At 6:45 p.m., Tom's vehicle reached the final approach to the Gramercy Club. The street appeared normal, with typical evening foot traffic and no obvious signs of surveillance or threat. But Sarah's team knew that somewhere in the surrounding buildings, the Patriot was making his final preparations for an attack that would shock the nation. "This is it," Sarah whispered to herself, watching the surveillance feeds as Tom's vehicle approached the club's entrance. "Whatever happens now will determine whether we save his life or lose him to a fanatic's twisted vision of patriotism." The radio crackled with confirmation from multiple surveillance teams. "All units report normal conditions. Target vehicle arriving at destination in 30 seconds. But Sarah's instincts screamed that something was wrong. The Patriot was too professional, too well trained to make his move during the most obvious and heavily protected moment of the evening. He would wait for the perfect opportunity, the moment when their guard was naturally lower, when the complexity of the operation created inevitable gaps in their coverage. As Tom's vehicle pulled up to the Gramercy Club's entrance, Sarah made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. "Hold position," she commanded over the radio. "Something doesn't feel right. The Patriot is too smart to strike now when we're expecting it." Her words proved prophetic when, moments later, every traffic light in a 6-block radius suddenly changed to red simultaneously, and the area's cellular towers experienced a coordinated failure that disrupted communication for several minutes. The Patriot was making his move, but not in the way they had anticipated. The coordinated electronic attack created exactly the chaos the Patriot had intended. Traffic throughout central London ground to a halt as confused drivers faced contradictory signals, while emergency services struggled with communication blackouts that lasted crucial minutes. In that window of confusion, Sarah realized they had severely underestimated their opponent's capabilities and intentions. "He's not here for Tom," she suddenly announced over the backup radio system, the pieces of the puzzle finally falling into place. "This whole operation is a diversion. He's using our response to get access to something else." Commander Ashford's voice crackled through the static-filled communication. "What do you mean? Tom is the target." "All the surveillance, all the threats, think about it," Sarah interrupted, her mind racing. "A former Special Forces operator goes to all this trouble to threaten Tom, knowing it will trigger the largest security operation London has seen in years. Every available specialist is here, focused on protecting one man. What does that leave unprotected?" The horrifying realization hit the entire command team simultaneously. While they had concentrated their resources on protecting Tom Parker Bowles at the Gramercy Club, the Patriot had created the perfect opportunity to strike at a much more significant target. Queen Camilla herself was attending a private charity event at the Victoria and Albert Museum, with significantly reduced security due to the emergency redeployment of personnel to protect her son. "All units, emergency redirect to the V&A Museum," Commander Ashford ordered, his voice tight with urgency. "The Queen is the real target. Tom's threat was a feint to draw us away from her." But even as police vehicles began racing across London through the artificially created traffic chaos, Sarah realized they were still thinking too conventionally. The Patriot had demonstrated sophisticated understanding of both royal protection protocols and urban infrastructure. His plan would be more complex than a simple redirection of their forces. Dr. Thornfield's voice came through the radio from the Psychological Analysis Unit. "Sarah, I've been reviewing the Patriot's communications again. He never actually specified Tom as his target. He talked about purifying the crown and eliminating foreign contamination. We assumed he meant Tom, but Queen Camilla is the real symbol of what he sees as foreign influence," Sarah finished. "Tom is just her son. She's the one who married into the royal family. The electronic disruption that had paralyzed central London was beginning to fade, but the Patriot had used those crucial minutes to position himself for his real attack.
Intelligence reports coming in from the V&A Museum painted an increasingly alarming picture.
Security cameras had captured images of someone in maintenance overalls gaining access to the building's service areas approximately 20 minutes earlier, just as the electronic chaos began.
"He's inside the museum," reported Sergeant Collins from the museum security team.
Maintenance staff confirmed someone entered through the service tunnels during the communication blackout.
Museum security footage shows an individual moving toward the upper galleries where the charity event is taking place. Sarah felt sick.
While they had been carefully orchestrating their trap around Tom, the Patriot had been implementing a far more sophisticated plan. He had studied their response protocols, anticipated their tactical decisions, and manipulated their resources with devastating effectiveness. The threats against Tom had been genuine enough to trigger their protective instincts, but they had been designed from the beginning to create exactly this situation.
The journey across London felt interminable despite the police convoy's emergency protocols.
Every traffic light they passed reminded Sarah of the Patriot's technological capabilities. Every delayed radio communication emphasized how thoroughly he had disrupted their operational effectiveness. They were racing to stop an attack they should have anticipated, against a target they should have protected, by an adversary who had consistently stayed one step ahead of their best efforts. At the V&A Museum, chaos was beginning to emerge as museum security realized the scope of the threat. The charity event, featuring Queen Camilla as the guest of honor, included nearly 200 prominent guests in the museum's elegant galleries. Evacuating them quickly without creating panic would be almost impossible, especially with someone potentially armed moving through the building's complex layout.
"Museum blueprint shows multiple access points to the gallery level," reported the tactical team leader over the radio.
"Service elevators, maintenance stairs, even access through the ventilation system."
With his military background, the Patriot could approach from any direction.
Sarah arrived at the museum to find a controlled emergency evacuation already in progress. Queen Camilla had been discreetly moved to a secure location within the building, but the process of safely extracting her through the crowds of guests and media would take precious time they might not have. Inside the museum, the atmosphere was tense but not yet panicked. Most guests remained unaware of the specific threat, believing they were experiencing a routine security precaution. Queen Camilla herself had been informed of the situation and was cooperating fully with her protection detail, though Sarah could see the strain in her composed demeanor. "Your Majesty," Sarah said as she was briefed on the situation by the Royal Protection Team. "We believe the individual targeting you is a former military operator who sees your marriage to the king as a threat to royal tradition.
He's highly trained and has demonstrated sophisticated planning capabilities." Queen Camilla's response surprised Sarah with its calm determination.
"Detective Inspector, I've faced criticism and threats before because of who I chose to marry. I won't let fear change how I live my life or fulfill my duties to the British people." But, even as they spoke, reports were coming in from the museum security team that painted an increasingly dangerous picture. The individual in maintenance overalls had been spotted on multiple levels of the building, always moving, never staying in one location long enough for security to intercept him. His movement pattern suggested detailed knowledge of the museum's layout and security procedures. "He's not just familiar with this building," observed Sergeant Collins, studying the security footage.
"He's been here before, probably multiple times. This isn't improvised reconnaissance.
He's been planning this specific operation for weeks, maybe months." The realization that the Patriot had been planning this attack for so long added another layer of complexity to their response. Every aspect of the museum's security, every protocol for protecting VIP guests, every potential response to an emergency situation would have been studied and anticipated. They weren't just dealing with a trained soldier, they were confronting someone who had turned their own security procedures into weapons against them. Dr. Thornfield arrived at the museum and immediately began analyzing the Patriot's behavior patterns based on the security footage.
"He's exhibiting classic special operations behavior," she reported. "Constant movement, multiple potential attack positions, and what appears to be preparation of alternative escape routes. But there's something else. His movements suggest he's not planning a direct attack. What do you mean? Sarah asked, studying the footage herself.
Look at his positioning, Dr. Thornfield pointed to the screen.
He's never taken a direct line toward the gallery where Queen Camilla is located. He's been positioning himself to control access routes and emergency exits. I think he's planning to trap everyone inside and, then, make demands.
The psychological analysis added a new dimension to their tactical planning. If the Patriot intended to take hostages rather than carry out an immediate assassination, it suggested a different mindset and different vulnerabilities they might exploit. But it also meant the danger to Queen Camilla and the other guests would be prolonged and unpredictable. Sarah's radio crackled with an urgent communication from Detective Sergeant Chen.
Command, we're receiving communications from inside the museum.
Someone is using the building's internal communication system to broadcast a message. The message, when it came through the museum's speaker system, sent chills through everyone who heard it. The voice was calm, educated, and utterly convinced of its own righteousness.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are now part of a historic moment. The purification of the British crown begins tonight. Queen Camilla, your foreign influence ends here.
You will publicly renounce your marriage to the king, or face the consequences of your contamination of our sacred monarchy. The panic that followed was immediate and intense. Guests who had remained calm during the evacuation now understood they were caught in the middle of a direct threat to the royal family. Security personnel struggled to maintain order as people pushed toward exits that the Patriot had apparently blocked or booby-trapped.
All exits on the ground floor are sealed, reported the tactical team.
Explosive devices at 3 main entrances.
Professional work, probably military-grade equipment.
He's not planning to let anyone leave until his demands are met. Queen Camilla's protection detail immediately began implementing emergency protocols, but their options were limited. Moving her through a building controlled by a hostile operative would be extremely dangerous, but remaining stationary made her an easier target for someone who clearly knew the museum's layout better than they did. Sarah realized they needed to change their approach entirely. Instead of reacting to the Patriot's moves, they needed to force him to react to theirs. But that would require understanding not just his tactical capabilities, but the psychology driving his actions. Dr. Thornfield, she said, pulling the psychologist aside.
What drives someone like this? What does he ultimately want?
Recognition, came the immediate reply. He genuinely believes he's saving Britain from what he sees as foreign contamination. In his mind, he's performing a patriotic service that history will vindicate. He wants to be seen as a hero, not a terrorist.
Then, we give him an audience, Sarah decided. But, on our terms.
The plan that emerged was risky and unconventional, but it offered their best chance of ending the crisis without bloodshed. Instead of treating the Patriot as a terrorist to be defeated, they would engage with him as someone whose concerns deserve to be heard, while simultaneously positioning their tactical teams for a decisive intervention. "This is Detective Inspector Sarah Mitchell," she announced over the museum's communication system, knowing the Patriot would be monitoring their transmissions. "I want to understand your concerns about the royal family. Can we discuss this directly?" The response came quickly, confirming that the Patriot was indeed monitoring their communications. "Detective Inspector Mitchell, you cannot understand the depth of contamination that threatens our monarchy.
Queen Camilla's foreign blood pollutes the sacred nature of the crown.
Tonight, that pollution ends." The words revealed both the depth of the Patriot's delusion and the genuine conviction behind his actions. He truly believed he was performing a sacred duty, which made him both more dangerous and, potentially more vulnerable to psychological manipulation. As Sarah prepared to engage the Patriot in what might be the most important conversation of her career, tactical teams continued moving through the museum's complex layout, searching for the explosive devices and planning their assault on his position. The next few minutes would determine whether they could end this crisis peacefully or whether it would escalate.